Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Mechanical Rock lunchtime chat. For those of you that don't know, Mechanical Rock is Australia's leading cloud native consultancy. We're all a bunch of DevOps engineers at heart, which means we're fully enabled to stay on the bleeding edge of technology, learn the tough lessons, and do the work to help our clients to win. So you see these three other beautiful faces here on the screen. We're gonna introduce ourselves in a second, but just wanted to give you all a bit of context behind our event today. So we are the four practice leads at Mechanical Rock, and we get together every week, always have. But obviously during the COVID crisis, we've been doing this remotely over web. And it's usually really great chats. It's a lovely way for us to connect, and we talk about what we're learning and what we're reading and what we're seeing out there. And we thought it would be really fun to invite a broader audience to that chat. So that's what we're doing here today. So you are the fifth member of this discussion and our panel. So please, we really would like for you all to participate. Put your questions and your comments into the question section. We'll make sure there's time to answer as many questions as we can. And obviously, if we need to follow that up with chats and coffees, we'd love to do that. But yeah, we'd love to also just hear what you have to say and your thoughts as we move through. Our topic today is turning to the cloud in times of uncertainty. And we're going to come at this from two angles today. Firstly, we're going to share what we're seeing locally with our clients, what we're seeing in the broader Perth and WA community, and also just generally what's happening in the industry. And secondly, we're going to think about more broader, how does the cloud help us in times of uncertainty? How has it helped and how can it help us going forward? So that's going to be the crux of our conversation today. But let's start by getting these lovely guys to introduce themselves. So we'll just go around the Zoom, if you will. Perhaps we can do a bit of an ISO check-in too, guys, so like normal. So introduce yourselves and then just let us know how you've been getting on. Pete, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi, I'm Pete, Head of Cloud Native Solutions here at Mechanical Rock. I've actually quite enjoyed this remote working. It's allowed me to kind of claim back some of my commute time, so I really enjoyed it. And I have to show off when reading this book, COBOL Programming. Just kidding. I'm happy to find in my bookcase. Marky, how are you going, man?
Hey, better than your COBOL programming, I think.
It's the future, man.
Yeah, yeah, it could be. So my name's Marcelo. I am the Head of Infrastructure Modernization at Mechanical Rock. Yeah, I've been a big fan of this isolation stuff during the COVID, but to stay sane, I've just been getting out on my mountain bike, really, just out in the trails and hitting the odd tree every now and then, knock some sense into me and get some new ideas. How about you, Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Simons. I'm the head of automated data platforms at Mechanical Rock. Yeah, as you can see, I've been living out in my shed for the best part of 3 months. I've been enjoying playing piano every day and walking my kids to school, and I've been celebrating wearing every single t-shirt that I own. So yeah, how about you, Tanya?
I'm Tanya. I lead the Enterprise DevOps and Transformation pillar. Yeah, it's been a complete emotional roller coaster. I really hated working from home in the beginning, but as soon as the kids went back to school, that all got a little bit easier. And yeah, I went to the office the other day. We have a new office now, and it was kind of magic. So I think on balance, I like to have a little bit of both now. But yeah, I'm keeping it together, so which is good. All right, so why don't we get into it? Just wanted to point out that we had a few connection problems this morning as we were setting up. So if there's a little bit of lag, really apologize to our audience. And guys, we do have an audience, so let's be on our best behavior, please. Thank you very much. All right, Marcelo, let's start with you. What are you seeing out there? What's happening? What's happening with the cloud? Yeah, what can you share?
Yeah, well, thanks, Tanya. Well, it's definitely been interesting and challenging times indeed, really. I've seen the COVID pandemic really push enterprises to its technological limits, really, with significant high loads and demand from their product or service offerings. Could be a good problem to have, and that's if you have the ability to scale up and down easily and efficiently, or it'd be quite the opposite. You know, we've seen companies just desperately looking on ways how to reduce costs, you know, to stay in business, figure out what the new normal is going to be. So yeah, it's been quite challenging, and it's almost comparable to working in the oil and gas industry, which can be quite cyclical in nature. With staff cuts having a close correlation with the oil price drops. And on one of them, I've even found myself in the unfortunate position of making colleagues redundant, which really sucked. But also due partly because when you invest in technology, you're investing for your peak period. So especially if you're on-premise on data centers, so you invest in technology to handle those peak periods. And in a downturn of the economy, you could have millions of dollars of IT equipment sitting there doing nothing. So a lot of it's going to waste. And then that's when you turn to closing offices, making people redundant, and so on. So the main thing I've really seen customers struggle with during this COVID pandemic is the elasticity. So not having the ability to scale up or down efficiently and easily, which is what I've seen really.
Hey Marcel, how do you actually see customers addressing that challenge with utilization and elasticity?
Yeah, a few ways actually. We've helped a few of our clients overcome this by modernizing the way they work with the cloud in a few ways. One of the main things is moving if you've got virtual machines, if you're running your workloads on virtual machines, and to some extent you've just made into the container world. If you're going to do that, what we've done for a few of our clients is migrated the application from the virtual machines to containers, but on top of that, implementing a good container orchestrator. And with that, it gives you the ability to dynamically scale up and down a lot easier and efficiently, and more dynamically as well. I mean, we've seen cost savings between 15 to 30% of just doing that alone. One example, using Kubernetes example as the orchestrator, it just depends on the workload. But one thing to note is when you do that, I think what a lot of people forget to do is to actually profile the application. So meaning really take note of or look into what your application is hungry with. Is it memory? Is it IO bound? Is it CPU? Doing that research first enables you to then set up a base infrastructure to then build on. And then you can put on top of that the container orchestrator and scale up and down a lot easier without having to worry about too much really in terms of doing anything manually. And you also get the chance to implement your business requirements into that tool and just ride the highs and lows a lot easier. And the other thing that I've seen a lot here in Perth is hybrid cloud environments. So you got customers with an on-premise data center and some with the workloads in the cloud. And what I've seen is in the networking department, so people start with a really simple network at the beginning for a connection from the on-premise to the cloud, and then they start growing and growing, and then this network between the cloud and the network, the on-premise and the cloud, really turns into a big spaghetti monster. So and then it's just a matter of just managing that mess, and it gets really complicated. So what we've done recently with a couple of clients is centralize the networking management with the cloud platform services, and then it allows them to actually grow a lot bigger and scale without adding complexity. So that alone, and also at the same time, we've actually reduced the running cost by 20 to 30%. So they had services up on the cloud that they didn't need to, like extra nets and internet gateways you didn't even need. So that's really helped a lot. But ultimately, the end goal should really be to achieve cloud native enlightenment, enabling you to build scalable applications fast. So on that note, I think, Pete, we've done a few work on a few clients now where we've implemented a few modern cloud solutions, which would have prepared them well for this. How have things gone with them?
Yeah, thanks, Marcelo. As you know, there's one client in particular that their transition has gone pretty well. For those listening, it was a blended team of 7 people building a cloud-native, Greenfield's cloud-native solution, basically to modernize a core business process, kind of re-architecting what was already there and bringing that process into the modern age. This particular client, they weren't used to working remotely. Everyone was kind of very much centralized around their office. People could only go in and out, but also centralized there. So naturally, they had these concerns around losing visibility of the work being done and the productivity of the team. We kind of worked with them a little bit. I ended up picking a software as a service tool to enable audio and video communication. So this allowed the team basically transitioned from one day in the office to being at home, kept all their regular stand-ups, all their regular meetings and stand-ups, the planning and the sprint reviews. And because this tool had the concept of rooms, the team was able to, just if the developers have problems or they just want to pair up or even just kind of, a water cooler talk, just kind of chat, jump into these rooms, share their screens if need be, just chat and kind of remain in communication. So it really didn't feel like people were isolated and away from each other. This, in terms of kind of the build executions and the metrics, had very, very positive. Successful executions on average per day almost doubled from 3 to 5, and more than halved, again, on average from 7 to 3 each day. So the net effect of doing much faster build, everything's going smoother. And this translated to the showcases as well. So features are getting built faster, they're better aligned to the business outcomes and the likes. And so I'd be very curious for those listening, has your transition like this gone as well? Or if you've got the horror stories, definitely share those. That'd be awesome to read out and listen to. 1 second.
So, Pete, the transition was obviously very smooth, but did they have to change any of their work habits?
They didn't actually, and I think it's a testament to both cloud native solutions and the accompanying ways of working. Continue their robust BDD or behavior driven development and test driven development practices through. So they're already picking and continue to pick the right piece of work at the right time, build it in the right way and get it out there. I know that not everyone listening knows what BDD is, and so there's a handout attached as well if you'd like to learn some more. Couple that with using trunk-based development. So they're picking, even if it's a large feature, they're picking a small piece of that work on short-lived branches, and quickly to build, merge back in. Peer reviews are much simpler now because there's not this huge change set to try and understand. These are small pieces of work, small units of work. And so, any issues with them are picked up quicker and all that. We're also using infrastructure as code. We like to call it everything as code. Means that there's no other teams, everything's defined in the code base. There's no other team to rely upon for software installations or patching. Developers understand, and these guys understand what they're building in a much greater detail, and better able to support that going through into production. And this even extends back to the continuous integration and delivery pipeline itself. That's code as well that's checked in, goes through the same rigorous review processes as well. So, it allows some fairly rapid prototyping as well in terms of low cost people and time effort, because you can run these things. If they work, great, you can keep them. If they don't, you can tear them down again. Or even what has happened when something goes really drastically wrong, you can burn to the ground and everything's in the code base and you can just redeploy it out, which we actually did a couple of months back. A little hiccup and destroyed a bunch of things, not production, thankfully, but we're able to recover that within, I think, a lapse was like a day. And that's really, within hours, we're rebuilding things and just getting it all back up and running. So. I did mention before that this is a greenfields project as well, and so people probably think that it's easy because it's greenfields, there's no other interactions, but it's actually the complete opposite. We're actually pulling data from the data center in using some of those network improvements that Marcelo mentioned before. We're also integrating back with Active Directory as well, so it's not an isolated system. It's heavily connected back in, but in that kind of modern distributed application kind of way. And we're even pushing real-time data changes back to the on-premise data warehouse. So things that happen in the application, the data analysts are able to grab those reports in real time or generate their reports and their kind of ad hoc stuff in real time as well. Which kind of makes me think, Paul, it's great that, I have data warehouse, which I guess some people don't even have. But the fact that it's an on-premise system must have so many constraints, and there must be better ways now to do that in the cloud. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I would agree, and I guess that's what we've been seeing in the market is that a lot of organizations are looking to accelerate their journey into the cloud. So if they weren't planning to do it imminently, they generally are now. And the reason for that is that they're finding the limitations of their existing setups. So whether they're reaching the storage or the compute capacity of their existing data centers or databases, or they're facing new contracts with the data center providers, they're looking at other options, and obviously cloud is front and foremost of those options. for a lot of companies, I think they're looking at optimizing costs and utilization as well, like Marcelo talked about. And obviously, in general, with cloud models, where people they want to take advantage of the on-demand pricing, for example, and in some cases the freedom from the license costs that might be attracted from whether it's proprietary software or tools that they require to run their on-premise data centers. So yeah, if I was going to summarize why turn to cloud, I think a lot of people are looking at it from the expansion point of view, and it's not a case of it has to be a wholesale migration. Again, like we were talking about before, you see a lot of people doing a hybrid setup to things like data platforms where they've got some stuff still on premise, they set up some stuff on cloud, and they use things like software-defined networking to bridge the gap between them. Add on things like data virtualization. You can present like a unified front, if you like, to the consumers of that data. So if that's your business intelligence tools or your machine learning toolkits and libraries, there's opportunities there to kind of take that migration in a staged approach. And one example from, yeah, sure.
Sorry, man, I don't mean to cut in. You're just talking about data hybridization. Is that a way for organizations to work around data gravity? That concept where there's so much data, it's just too hard to get off the on-prem?
Absolutely, and I can probably give you an example of that. One of the clients that we worked with last year, rather than take the step of migrating everything to the cloud in one go, they kind of applied the 80-20 rule. So they found that with about 20% of the data, they could get 80% of the insight. So what they did was to take a collection of the data from their existing data warehouse and migrate that into the cloud. And then they built dashboards on top of that using cloud SaaS software, things like Tableau Online, Microsoft Power BI. So doing that kind of staged use case-based approach, they're able to get a lot of value really quickly. And I guess that sums up why a lot of people are looking to move to the cloud for their data platforms, as well as the ability to innovate. There's a lot of the best tools for working with data in the cloud are cloud-based. Open source tools, we see a lot of these used for things like data ingestion, whether it's things like StreamSets is a big one, or even AWS managed services like Database Migration Service. Companies are finding it easier than ever to migrate their data to the cloud. And normally when you see these innovation sort of projects getting started off, in the past there used to be things like it would be shadow IT that kicked them off, but you don't need to do that these days. Working with the cloud gives you a kind of a way to forecast your costs accurately, because it's basically on-demand pricing. And made me think, Tanya, how do you think shadow IT is faring in a COVID crisis that we're currently facing?
Yeah, that's been interesting, actually. I'm going on anecdata here, but so those organizations that had more traditional kind of operating structures, top-down decision making, more centralized management, are the kind of places where you tend to find shadow IT emerging, because that's the only way to get stuff done. They were hit the hardest. There was this definite disruption, kind of a paralysis that came in as a result of kind of the conventional communication methods being disrupted. And that happened to shadow IT too. Like, those water coolers just weren't there when they needed them. From what I can tell, shadow IT emerged faster than the formal communication structures did, and the antibodies will always find a way of swarming. But it's such a pity that we have to rely on informal channels to get stuff done. And I think that's probably one of the big lessons that can be learned through all of this, is that, and especially as we emerge, is how do we improve the formal structures, or at least the decision-making models, to kind of make that easier. Yeah.
So Tanya, what have WA organisations learned from this disruption?
I think the most interesting thing, that opportunity that's come out of this for WA organisations, is the data that's been uncovered. I think we can all be forgiven. We've all been in this together. It's been a global pandemic, And so customers and employees can kind of forgive disruptions. So if you've got a formal structure and you've kind of been a bit hurt by this, and you haven't got that elasticity and that scalability that you were talking about, Marcelo, people will forgive you. That's not going to happen when this happens again, or especially if it happens to more to one sector. And so the onus is really on IT leaders now to take that data and do something with it. And you don't have to do a huge, big transformation. I think really, we believe that the key to transformation is about kind of building that that skill of being able to make database decisions based on what you learn, like based on experiences and experiments. So take the data, see which processes broke, which teams kind of fell apart, what areas did well, where was there a lack of problems in the organization, and build a backlog based on that. And so you use that data. So that's been, I think that's really what organizations can learn from it, yeah.
Okay. So how about, what have you seen in particular, or any trends or examples here in WA?
Yeah. I'd like to call out one client example. I think that's really heartening. Aged care provider that we work with, somewhere late last year, they made the decision to move a large chunk of their workloads to the cloud. So they put the investment in and did the hard work at the tail end of last year. So they were really well positioned when the crisis hit. So not only were they able to, just have that elasticity and scale and be less disruptive, but they were able to put in, cloud-based communication software really, really quickly, and then to not only have that for their teams, but to scale that broader, so that their residents could communicate with their families using that, which is obviously super, super important as their centres became completely locked down. So that was I think a really, really positive outcome. And we've seen all kinds of great things. Now, we're lucky here in WA. We haven't, touch wood, haven't been as affected as other parts of the country and the world. And we've still had to, especially if you look at that, we're a big resource economy. The biggest disruptions there have been around interruptions to operations and restrictions in operations. And so we've seen those companies having to change their workflows and their patterning and their scheduling for staff, and put in screening processes into their workflows. And some places have been able to do that, respond really, really quickly, and other companies have kind of skipped a beat and are more like kind of been slower to uptake. But I think with that, with that opportunity and that luck that we've had, we've got a bit of a responsibility as we kind of emerge now, because everyone's focused on recovery. We're probably a few steps ahead of everyone else in terms of being able to go out and recover faster, and our general local economy coming to life sooner. So we can kind of set the tone for that new normal, and that's pretty cool. We've got a really good safety culture here in WA. So how do we pivot? How do we kind of extend that thinking just beyond physical safety, but into creating safety for teams in terms of psychological safety and the opportunity to do better decision making. And that's I'm pretty excited about the way that WA can lead the charge, because I think we're often just forgotten about, and I think that we've actually got so much to offer, and I think that we're going to be really key to helping get Australia back onto its feet economically.
I think we might take a look at some questions there. We've got some good ones that have come through. And I think one actually kind of touches a little bit on the whole safety culture as well. So I got a question from John, who's asking about the tools that our developers use when building cloud solutions. They're kind of applicable for most of us. I think in a nutshell, we use the tools that the cloud provider provides, because they're a managed service. There's no kind of upkeep and versioning and things like that. Many years ago, I was in charge of managing Nexus and Jenkins and all those kind of developer tooling. It was a pain trying to update and patch versions and kind of keep abreast of it all. So I think without kind of naming some of the specific ones, because it's a bit of a long list, it's using the tooling that the cloud providers provide. And because we're doing that, we've got time to look at the safety things like code quality checks as part of the pipeline, running automated testing. We can record tests for UI or doing our B2D specs and the likes locally, and they just natively run into the cloud and just kind of hook them in. So yeah, what about you guys? What tools do you
Yeah, I think if you talk about infrastructure as code as well, I think what you mentioned earlier, I mean, you got your I think preferably you could use the cloud platform tool that they have, but there are some there's a few cloud platforms which may not be that mature. So I mean, we've used Terraform a fair bit when the cloud platform hasn't been mature enough to get all the services deployed as code. So that's another tool that we've seen, and I think generally we've seen a lot more support for GitHub as version control in terms of integrating with the cloud platform, whether it be AWS, Google, or the other one. I forget the name, but yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with all that as well. And just coming back to the source control and the model of working, where Pete, you mentioned before about trunk-based development and the idea of collaboration around a source code repository. When you have everything as code, it makes that process really simple. So the general process is you work on code together, you create a pull request, you review it, it gets merged into master, and that kicks off your build process. So whether you're doing something like Terraform or CloudFormation, which we use a lot, it starts a process that goes and builds and goes through your environments, whether you have like dev or non-prod environments, right through to production. But for me, it extends into data platforms as well. So there's some great tools out there that are quite emergent, like DBT is one, where people are taking the experience of software development and continuous delivery and continuous integration and applying that to data, which is really interesting. And the great thing that I like about it is that it actually enables existing staff and organizations. So in the data platforms or data engineering space, just about everyone that works in that area has experience with SQL. And that's what the tool uses to do transformations and to do your verifications as well. And it has a test-based approach as well. So, a lot of the time we look to what's out there, not only from the cloud provider, but in the open source world as well. There's so much to get behind, and that's what makes the job easier, and that's what ramps up the productivity, I would say.
Cool. That's a good one, Paul. We've got another question here from Randy. His question was, what other container orchestrated tools do you see in demand, specifically in Perth? It's a good one, actually. To be honest, the main ones I've seen, the most mature ones, I think you probably heard of, is the Kubernetes, which is really accelerating at a really fast pace in its iteration. But if that's not for you, I mean, if you're on whatever cloud vendor that you're on, AWS, Google, or the other one, you try to use their orchestration platform first. And if your workloads and your applications are simple enough, they can make use of all of what the cloud platform offers, like AWS is ECS. I would use ECS Fargate if you go AWS, and Google it's obviously Kubernetes. But if you're on premise as well, Kubernetes is also another one. But I've seen Docker Swarm used a lot as well for those smaller sites. But they're the main ones to consider if you're going to, I guess, orchestrate and your container workloads. That's something to think about.
Let's move away from tools for a second. We've got a question come through from Ben, wanting to learn more about what sources of data or metrics can be harvested to judge remote teams' performance. And that's a really good question. So, in terms of measuring developer productivity, there's kind of no better source than your State of DevOps metrics, the ones that were published in the State of DevOps report. I think they're on their 6th year. And if you haven't read it, Accelerate's a really good summary of that study. Jean Kim, Nicole Forsgren, and Jez Humble. So they've really identified 4 key metrics: the throughput metrics, deployment frequency, and lead time for change. And then your stability metrics, time to restore service and change failure rate. Those have the strongest correlation to organizational performance. So if you're not measuring those already, those are really worth the investment to put in. And they can be, it's great data because you can see what were those measures like before you have a disruption, what are they like during a disruption, and how do you map your recovery as you come out of a disruption. So those are really kind of 4 of the key metrics to answer there. I don't know, do you guys have any other metrics that you'd like to look at?
For me personally, I think those are kind of the 4, and I think the cloud providers, say, to call it AWS, a lot of that comes from the underlying platform. So really, it's not a case of trying to do whole bunch of extra work to get to the point where you can generate those metrics. There's taking ones that are already there or building things on. So I think the first two you mentioned, they kind of come out of things like code pipeline already. You can quite simply measure those. And the other two, really, if you've got CloudWatch alarms, measuring things, you can use those, let's say repurpose, but use them as well to drive those other metrics. So you kind of get a two for on those ones.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that, having the metrics, as long as it's important to you, that's what keeps you better informed. In data platforms, normally you find out about problems from users first, which is the wrong way to have it happen. And it's like unpicking, a spider web, I guess. And by having those metrics around, the last latency of your tables migrating or things like that, or the number of errors that you're experiencing, helps you stay informed and helps you recover faster. So I'd say that whatever is appropriate to your field and what you're doing. And I guess the other thing is that people often come to it at the end of a project, and it's almost an afterthought, whereas it should be baked in at the beginning, and that's what we try to do with all our engagements.
I think it also depends on who you are in terms of monitoring, from a developer to a management, whatever. Some people don't like dashboards, some people don't want to sit there looking at dashboards and graphs, where in other people it may be valuable. I mean, you just maybe want to get an alert, look, something's gone wrong, or we've hit, the mean time between failures has gone up or down, being told of when stuff like that happens. I mean, the cloud gives you those tools out of the box with some config really these days, and you're pretty much there. So I think that's where what I look for in metrics, just like to be told.
Do one of you guys want to pick one of the next other questions here?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting one around does cloud native equal vendor lock-in? And I think it's really the wrong way to think about it. Any technology choice, you're effectively locking yourself in, whether it's an operating system, programming language, picking frameworks and the likes. So rather than thinking and being scared of, oh, I'm going to be locked in and I can't change, flip it around and think, by being locked in, what value does it give me? Is it choice of services and way I could run the compute layer or storage layer, or is it giving me the ability to automate the crap out of everything so I can run really, really fast and build upon those? So I think that's, it really is kind of flip the question around. So, but also you just got to go serverless as well. Don't worry about containers, they're old school. You need to go serverless all the way, it's the future. So.
Just want to remind you, we have a live studio audience.
Yeah, no swearing.
Kubernetes is serverless. It's a new serverless, cloud native. Get with the times, Pete.
Hey, man.
We've probably got time for just one last question. And I'm wondering if we should just pick that security one, because we've had a couple of security related questions come through. It's probably not my biggest area of expertise, so might ask you, other than the fact that it's been drilled into me that yes, the cloud is more secure than not being on the cloud. But what do you guys want to talk about the kind of state of cloud security at the minute?
Well, I can start there.
Yes.
I mean, what I've seen with how people are addressing security, especially on the cloud, is understanding the boundaries of what the cloud vendor is responsible for and what you as a customer are responsible for. So if you run your workloads on virtual machines, you're responsible for updating that virtual machine with all the latest patches, updates, and any new vulnerabilities that come in. So, but as you move towards serverless and managed services on the platform, that becomes more of the cloud vendor's responsibility, and it's easier for you to spend more time on your actual business development instead of having resources run around maintaining your servers and versions of infrastructure that you're managing. So let the cloud vendor do that, and if it just gives you more time and more secure, because they're constantly updating and keeping up with the times. Whether you might have some people that go on holidays, and then your security goes on holidays with them. So it's just just to be aware. That's the main thing I've seen, especially with the networking stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably an understated part of infrastructure as code, right? The cloud doesn't stop you doing stupid things, same as in a data center. But if you're using infrastructure as code, it's more visible, right? It's in the code. So if you want to give everybody, God mode, full admin access, it's there, but it's kind of very, very public looking at the code. So conversely, it means if you do something stupid, you can recover from it pretty quick as well. You can make those changes. If you haven't got a vetting process to go through it, it's probably a good kick up the butt to actually have a good vetting process to review these things. And again, there's automated tooling, right? So there's things like CFN nags are great one if you're using CloudFormation. And look at those things, and every time you have a little star in there to give full permissions, it'll scream at you. So yeah.
I think it's also easy.
Sorry?
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to understand as much about security when you start using those services, really. So if you do it yourself, you really have to be a lot more knowledgeable of that kind of stuff. But
yeah, I was just going to add on that note, really, because you see a lot of people in the cloud using and relying on SaaS vendors a lot more. So there's a lot more standardization out there in terms of security methods and protocols, whether it's OAuth or SAML, these standardized methods of exchanging trust. And so organizations are commonly working with an identity provider, whether that's something like Okta or Azure Active Directory in the cloud. And it's more straightforward to integrate these things. Like you said, when you don't have to write it yourself, there are established patterns for integrating these products. And it allows you to worry on the parts that you should be worrying about. So if you take, for example, like a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake, you're concerned with the roles that your database users have and the access to the resources that they have, the access to the compute that they can use, which directly relates to the bill that you'll receive at the end of the month. So I think it puts the responsibilities in the right place. And like you said, the responsibility model split between customer and cloud vendor is driving the right security behaviors, because everyone is thinking about security, whether it's, it's not, I guess a big bottleneck that I've seen historically is where you have a security team in an organization that, depending on where you are in the organization, is stopping all your changes from flowing through to production. By making every team and every developer think about security first, it generally ends up in a better result.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think about security a lot more than I ever did in my career, over the last few years. Guys, I think we have to wrap up there. There's still a few questions that we weren't unfortunately able to get to, but we'll do our best to follow up with you guys directly afterwards. Thank you very much to everyone for all your comments and your questions that came through. Really, really appreciate the participation. Love to chat some more. So if there's something comes up for you, you'd like to talk about anything, just reach out. We're all on LinkedIn. Yeah, really happy to chat anytime. Another great opportunity coming up in November is the Latency Conference. It's our only local cloud conference dedicated to building high performing secure applications in the cloud. That's coming in November, and if WA keeps on doing the way we're doing, that will very hopefully be face to face, and which will be such a great occasion because we're all missing each other a lot. Call for papers is going to come out next week, so if you'd like to submit to talk, we'd love to hear your voice. We've got so much interesting stuff happening here in WA. It's such a great showcase of what's happening in the WA tech community and the cloud community, so please put your hand up to give a talk on that. So whenever we meet, guys, we always wrap up with a little bit of a kind of a check-in on what we're reading and how we're keeping ourselves sharper and what we're learning about. So let's do that as we go around the table. I don't know, Marcelo, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, what I'm currently working on, I've got my head deep in it, is the CNCF certified Kubernetes service provider requirement. So we're kind of working towards, or very, very close now actually, to becoming one of WA's first certified Kubernetes service providers through the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So we're nearly there. I just sat the exam myself. So yeah, so looking good. Pete, hey, what are you up to?
Yeah, yeah, keen to visit a whole bunch of things. Alex Debris' DynamoDB book, obviously it was released 3-4 weeks ago now. I've been diving into that. For a technical book, it's really easy to read, it's really accessible. I've been really enjoying it. And it's been great to be challenged on kind of the ideas. I've used DynamoDB for years now, to be kind of challenged around the ways of working that are there, and sort of personal growth always begins at that edge of being comfortable and forward into the uncomfortable. It's been great. I do want to just call out quickly, I had a question from Luke around how do you know that your apps are doing the right things? And Luke, I will get to reach out to you after this, but I just want to say that we are the only WA consultancy that's doing the world architecture reviews, and so we can come in and kind of run a whole bunch of questions through your application and your AWS landscape, and come out with some good stuff to help raise the bar for those. Yeah. Paul, what have you been up to, man?
Well, me, as a jack of all trades, master of none, I've been looking at SageMaker Studio. The promise is that machine learning is accessible to everyone, so I'm really testing that theory to the max at the moment with SageMaker Studio, which has become generally available, and in more regions as well. So, yeah, that's where I'm stuck. How about you, Tanya?
I've just done reading Agile Conversations. It's from the IT Revolution bookshelf, written by Frederick and Squirrel. Yeah, really great. Definitely in my wheelhouse, but it was written from a engineer's perspective. So it's actually gives us quite good language to kind of think about the importance of conversations and how they drive transformation. Particularly love the idea of how to build trust in a conversation by using what they call TDD for people, so test-driven development for people, and how you can use that technique to kind of test and your understanding and as you work through a conversation, and it's a great way of building trust. So yeah, love that book very much. Guys, thank you very much. What's that?
Test-driven development on people. So we're allowed to test on people now, are we? Experiment with things. I thought that was illegal.
Yeah.
And our Pete.
No, not anymore. We testing all the time. Yeah, guys, the four of us, the three of you, thank you very, very much. Great to catch up with you all again. Big thanks to Mechanical Rock for hosting this event today, and mostly a big, huge thanks to everyone in the community that came in and joined us today. Really enjoyed having your feedback and questions. There'll be a short survey that comes out after this. Please give us your feedback. We live and die by feedback. It's what keeps us going and how we learn. So we really would value that. And if there's anything you'd like to hear more from us, either in a format like this or face-to-face, just drop it in, and we look forward to following up. So I think that's it. Big smiles, and have a great Thursday, everybody.
Thanks a lot.